to A Cut Above, brought to you by the Southern Forest Products Association. We're very excited today to have yet another guest, and this one's a little bit special for SFPA because he is a current board member and a past board chairman. So Mark Richardson with the Westervelt Company. Mark, glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
I know you do a lot with Westervelt, you do a lot with SFPA, so give me just a brief overview who you are for maybe people who don't know you or haven't met you before. A little bit about you, a little bit about your background, and a little bit about Westervelt.
Sure. Mark Richardson, my current position with the Westervelt Company is Executive Vice President of Wood Products. Been in this role for about a year and a half. Prior to this role, I served in several roles in the sales function over the previous 20 years or so. I'm a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, still live here, graduate of the University of Alabama, and I've been married to my wife for 24 years, and we have a daughter that'll be 20 years old next month, who is a sophomore at Auburn University. So, a little infighting there, but, when I'm not doing work, I enjoy outdoor activities, golf, hunting, fishing, and also reading. So that's 15 seconds about me.
and Westervelt, you've been in this industry for a while. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at Westervelt and what role Westervelt plays in the greater Southern Pine lumber community.
Sure. So Westervelt, we operated as Gulf States Paper Corporation for many decades prior to changing our name to the Westervelt Company in the mid 2000s. But we've been around in the pulp, paper, and forest products industry for over 100 years. So we're currently in our 5th generation. Long-standing company, committed to doing things the right way, operationally in the forest, very geared towards sustainability and just doing things the right way. We have two Southern Yellow Pine sawmills, both in the state of Alabama, one in Moundville and one in Thomasville. And in addition, we own a fair amount of timberland in the South, primarily Alabama, some in Mississippi, some in Georgia, and then up through the Carolinas and into Virginia. So pretty entrenched in the forest products industry in the South.
And I'm coming back to that sustainability point, but kind of to really start our conversation off today is why Southern Pine? What do you want people watching and listening to our conversation today? What do you want them to know about Southern Pine lumber? What do you want them to take away about why it's good, why they should use it, why it's one of the premier species for building materials?
Sure. Yeah, several reasons. One's performance in the field. It's the strength factors of the product are excellent. It's available in a multitude of dimensions for multiple applications. You'll see a lot of it in the pressure treated industry for outdoor use, as well as, structural building components for just structure and structural construction. But from a forest standpoint, the Southern Pine forests they're very sustainable. We manage them we manage our forests to 2 certifications, actually, for FSC and SFI. Very strict standards around water conservation, protecting the forest, regeneration, regrowth, and just keeping the forest healthy. And without that, we wouldn't be here, right? So, it's critical to our success and longstanding.
That and y'all are one of the big leaders in sustainability. Westervelt, I'll toot the horn for you. Very excited to see y'all on that PBS special a couple of weeks ago, which you can find on the SFPA website. You talk about the economics of it and how it supports the community. You're from those communities, Mark, right? So, sustainability is such a huge part of that. Talk to me a little bit more about Westervelt's role in sustainability and that commitment and a little bit of that process. You kind of already got us there with the certifications, but how paramount is this?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's survival for us. But we're very active in the communities that we operate in, which are going to be rural America, right? So you start looking at the economic impact that we can have in those in those regions through direct employment, indirect employment, and then the environmental impact that we have by the way we operate, whether that's out of our mills or whether that's in the forest. But if we don't do all those things right, we don't have much of a future. So it's the core of what we do.
Right. And all of our members, that's a huge focus because
Absolutely.
it's such a dimensional, we talk about dimensional lumber, but it's such a dimensional industry and how many people it touches in the economy.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit more personal question, nothing crazy, but what is it about this industry that you like? What is it about the lumber, the Southern Pine community?
Yeah.
What keeps you going?
Yeah, we've touched on it a little bit. A lot of it is the people. Whether you're talking about your customers, your suppliers, your peers, you're going to be dealing with good people with a common goal, and that is to sustain our industry and do what's best for our industry. And a lot of that goes back to the forest, and it goes to how we operate, how we treat people, how we treat our employees and our suppliers and our customers. So the people is a big part of it, and then just our story. Again, around the environmental sustainability, the carbon sequestration, there's a great story there, and something that we can all be proud of to be a part of.
Yeah, and we're continuing to tell that story. SFPA is, y'all are, all of our members are. It's just a story that we can't tell enough, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear it domestically and internationally with a lot of the trade shows that we do to promote Southern Pine around the world. You were talking about suppliers and buyers and all the people involved in the process. As a lumber manufacturer, what are you hearing from buyers about Southern Pine? What are you getting in terms of questions or comments or accolades about lumber?
Yeah, I think right now, specifically for Southern Pine, there's a lot of growth opportunities. The capacity of Southern Pine lumber has grown obviously over the last few years. So we're seeing some markets respond to that. There's some exciting things happening in the mass timber market that we're seeing. As CLT becomes, it's continuing to grow its position in some applications of building, and so that's been exciting to see. And also just geographic expansion of the product. We're seeing our product stretch further. So there's a lot to be excited about from the Southern Pine aspect.
And that's great to know because we always talk about we plant more trees than we harvest, and knowing the supply that we already have, that just creates what I think is a great future for our industry. But maybe I'm a little bit biased.
No, couldn't agree more.
What are you hoping for the back half of 24? What are you looking at that's going to be exciting or that you hope to see come out before the end of the year?
Yeah, so our market conditions are what they are. We're in a little bit of a cyclical downturn in our industry. So, what we have to focus on is making sure that we sustain through this, that we keep our employees safe. We need to continue to invest in opportunities to keep our employees safe and healthy, and just keep our operations healthy through this.
Right.
So,
and kind of
I'm hoping to see a little improvement in market conditions second half of the year, but listening to the news right now, you get really mixed signals on that. So, we just have to control what we can control.
We were talking before we started recording that this is a cyclical industry like so many other industries out there, right? And this industry took such a battering in 2008. And we know we're going to bounce back, and that's the good thing. Whether it's the sustainability or the demand for lumber use, we know that we're not going anywhere. So that's always the silver lining, right? So kind of expanding that question of what do you hope for the back half of the year? I always like to end our conversations on a cut above by asking people to pull out their crystal ball. And where do you see the forest products industry and specifically the Southern Pine lumber community and Southern Pine lumber industry in the next 10 years plus? What do you think that's going to look like? What are we going to be doing at that point?
Yeah, I think you'll continue to see market opportunities for Southern Pine. We have some associations like SFPA and others doing great work out there promoting our product and what we have to offer. And we'll continue to see dividends from that. I think from an operations standpoint, you'll also see us continue to embrace the emerging technologies. You know, a lot of people don't think about our industry as being somewhere where you can go see robotics, artificial intelligence, condition monitoring, and that kind of thing. So I think from an operations standpoint, you'll see us continue to evolve with technology and become more efficient and better operators.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that, and that hasn't come up in a couple of the past interviews we've done. But my first Forest Products Expo up in Nashville in 23, that automation is just amazing. The optimization, the camera technology. You're right. You think that you just cut up this piece of wood, you run it through the sawmill, and it ends up on the truck. It's amazing some of the technology that's out there.
Yeah,
and then it keeps
really
advancing
is.
too.
Yeah,
So
some misperceptions out there about how we operate and what we do, but there's some really impressive things going on in our industry. They're exciting.
yeah, been around for centuries, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. So,
That's right.
Mark, thank you very much for today, for our conversation. Thanks for everything you do with SFPA as a leader, and thanks to you and the Westervelt team for continuing to drive the Southern Pine lumber industry to new heights. So, thanks again.
My pleasure. Thanks, Christian.
We'll see you next time on A Cut Above.